Good morning. What a strange morning this has been for me. Um, I'm Rosemary Bray McNatt. I'm president of Starr School for the Ministry in Berkeley, California, and it is after 11 in the West. And the internet in my community is being taxed to its limit. So here I am streaming on my phone, hoping that I am coming. It's taking a little adjustment, but here's hoping that it's working for now. If you hear me sounding a little sniffly, it's because, after all, it's allergy season. And this view from my office is probably not the most wonderful view, but it's a view. So we're going to go with that. I've been thinking this week a lot about what inspires me. And I feel like this is a moment when inspiration really matters. It's been very important for me in my own state of mind to look for things that make me smile, and even more important than that, things that make me want to cheer. Cheering is one of the first things, in fact, that has been inspiring for me. You probably know that every night at around 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock rather, in New York City, people are coming out on their balconies or on their front stoops or in the street, and they're cheering for healthcare workers. That inspires me. I am deeply moved and a little nostalgic. Um, it's the kind of thing that my family and I would love to be participating in. In fact, there is some conversations right now going on in Oakland, in my neighborhood, about how we can go out and cheer for the healthcare workers in our midst. It's um, it's an amazing thing to look at. So I've been scouring the internet, and you'd think I'd be sick of the internet with the number of Zoom calls that I do. But when I'm not talking on the phone or doing a Facebook Live, I kind of look around for the things that inspire me and make me happy. There's a whole subset of views of people leaving the hospital, and the COVID teams that are taking care of them, cheering them on. I think I found the first one um, maybe a week ago, where a woman checked out of, I think it was Staten Island Hospital, after 2 weeks in the hospital away from her husband and her 5 kids. And that was inspiring enough that she got better. But what was just so uplifting for me was to see the gauntlet of healthcare workers in every part of the hospital who were allowed to be down there, applauding her as they rolled her wheelchair toward the exit. It was just amazing. They were all wearing masks, they were all wearing gloves, but they were all applauding and cheering. And apparently, this is happening all over the country. People have been creating these sort of mini parades for folks who are surviving the COVID-19 virus. And we have to remember that most people do survive it. It's hard to think about that when we know about the horrific toll of death. When I went to bed last night, it was more than 25,000 people who have died in this country since all of this began. And so we get so focused about that we forget. Most people survive it. Most people don't even have to go to the hospital. But there's this other middle ground where if you're sick enough to go to the hospital, the calculus begins to change. And that is why I believe that it is so inspiring for so many of us to see the people who have been through this and come out on the other side. I also think it's important. I was reading some of the comments You know, they say don't read comments on things like this, but I was trying to figure out why people were commenting in a negative way about why these people weren't off taking care of other patients and why they didn't have anything else to do. And then I realized it's inspiring for them too. By the time a person gets to the hospital for this illness, the chances of their not surviving is gets exponentially higher. And by the time they have to be on a ventilator, 80% of the people who get on the ventilator don't come off. So the idea that folks who are taking care of these folks and struggling with them for every breath um, would be cheering when people survive and get to go home makes total sense. And this is happening all over the world. One of the clips I found was of what they believe is the longest surviving or the oldest surviving um, COVID patient who was in Great Britain and who was 104 years old, and he came home. Um, these are, I think, incredibly uplifting moments for people. I feel like every story we get to hear right now of wonderful things happening is good for us. It's especially good for us as we sit in isolation in our homes, as we get tired of being on Zoom, as we, have to navigate our families and, try to figure out what's for dinner in a house full of things that, you know, um, you probably didn't get a chance to go out and shop as much as you wanted or you were looking for, all the things that become first world problems in a lot of ways. Um, it's wonderful to turn on your internet platform of choice and to find these incredible stories. Um, I remember that yesterday or the day before in the New York Times, there was a just amazing story about the people who work in a maternity ward in Brooklyn. And the good news for them is that of the mothers and babies who have come in with COVID-19, the mothers, um, they haven't lost a mother yet and they haven't lost a baby yet. And so the story just outlined the patients that were being cared for, one of whom was on a ventilator and who had to have the baby induced while she was on a ventilator and didn't get to hold the baby for a while, but they're both okay. I invite you to think about the people and the circumstances that you've heard about or read about that have just made your heart lift. Uh, I'm also really into reading the Facebook groups by people like A Million Masks. I think it's called the Million Mask Challenge. I joined it because I was looking to find patterns to make masks. And I am at best indifferent sewer, but I can run my machine. And yes, Kim, I see you on here today. I will be checking in with you later. Kim's a much better seamstress than I am. But just reading about the ways in which people are coming together to share fabric, the search for elastic, which may sound unimportant, but since Michael's is closed and Joanne is closed, and people are sewing masks all over the country, the elastic bands are pretty hard to find. So there are these incredible partnerships with different people trying to figure out what works better. Do you use ties? And the number of people who are sewing and the number of masks they are producing. There's a woman who comes home every night from her work, which is not in the healthcare field, but is in some job that is considered essential. And she comes home and sews 25 masks every night. Now, to me, that sounds incredible when she talks about what she's doing. She doesn't think of it as incredible at all. It's her need, and it's also a need I understand. It's her need to participate, to be a part of this great effort. Those of us who are of a more political bent are much crankier about why it is that civilians have to scrape around for fabric and elastic and dig out their old sewing machines to make masks, and what it says about the state of our nation right now. And, I think we do need to be thinking about that quite a bit, actually. But I also think that we can't just think about that. We can't just spend all our time on the news. We can't just think about what we're going to do in the political campaigns for the fall. That can't be all we do because we won't be able to keep our spirits up because too many of the things that sustain us are not easily at hand. Um, you can't go out and hang out with your friends in the way that you used to complain about the government or to talk about who you're voting for. You can't do any of those things in the same way. So you need the other things that help to lift our spirits. So people are sewing masks. Thank you, Jessica. Reverend Melanie, one of our colleagues, is sewing gowns and masks for the hospital. By the way, people are not just sewing masks. They're sewing surgical caps for people to wear because people believe that the virus could live in your hair. They don't know how long. They haven't done a lot of studies about it. But in addition to just making sure that you're being sterile and doing the things you need to do. And those things are running short just like everything else. Some people are sewing masks and other materials out of surgical drape, which is, I think, I forgot the name of the fabric, but there's a lot more of that lying around than there are masks. And so there are lots of YouTube videos about how to make masks out of surgical drape. There are a whole range of commentaries about the appropriate materials and what works best. And we're getting a lot of information, believe it or not, in this kind of moment from doctors and nurses who sew. Um, they're designing their own masks, they're making the patterns available. So, what's inspiring to me is this collective, communal um, coming together and sharing of resources, and this constant reminder that we are part of this interdependent web and seeing it being lived out in our day to day lives as they exist now is just really amazing and inspiring to me. I love looking at all of the different people who are helping to sew masks for different communities. One woman who was on this list that I'm reading has a grandson in the military, and he's deployed with a group of people somewhere in the United States, and they have one, what they call a gaiter, which is kind of this thing that goes over your face. It looks like a kind of big turtleneck, but that's all they've got. And what she's done is because she sews a lot and because she's near a base that has the material that is approved for use by soldiers, um, she has sewn 2 masks for each person in his unit and sent them off. And so that led to a whole stream of conversation among people who want to sew masks for the military and what kind of fabric is important to use and why you can't just use any fabric, and lots of cross postings about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. The speed with which people respond to one another who are working to make these things happen is another inspiring thing to witness in every facet of our lives online these days. There is the spirit of mutuality and cooperation that is also really inspiring to see. Um, so I want to invite you to to look around in your own life for those inspirations, for those moments and those people who are willing to try something new, to work hard at doing something that they've never done. Very close to home, I'm guessing that almost every one of you has attended an online worship service in the last few weeks, and many of you almost certainly attended one this past Sunday for Easter. Um, what's been just wonderful is to see not only the kind and variety of worship services that UU congregations and other congregations have committed to creating, the um, variety of music that music directors have made available, the choirs that have been singing together separately, and the number and kind of songs that they've been able to put together with the help of their music directors and some very fancy camera work has been amazing. So remember that even close to home, there are ministers and music directors and religious educators who are creating virtual worship for communities all over this country. And many of them have never done anything close to this before. And so I think we should be giving thanks and continuing to be inspired by our capacities to do good for each other, to lift each other's spirits, to share what we have, whatever that is, um, with other people who may not have it. Uh, some of you may also use a, a service called Nextdoor. It's a neighborhood kind of community. And there have been things that have abound next door that are pretty problematic on some levels. But in this moment, there have been some amazing uses of Nextdoor and some very community building parts of Nextdoor. In my neighborhood, Maxwell Park in Oakland, there are a couple of pregnant women who are looking for blood pressure machines. They're close to their due date. They need to check their blood pressure. They don't want to spend however much money there is for something that they don't really intend to use anymore. And so a couple of us who have blood pressure machines are sort of sterilizing our blood pressure machines and arranging pickup for pregnant women who need their blood pressure checked regularly in their telehealth visits because doctors are not seeing people in their offices. They're doing it on their phones and on their computers. And with the help of technology, people are able to do these things. So there's a lot to be inspired about right now in the midst of a very difficult time. If we are going to keep our eyes open, I think that we'll see it. So let me encourage you every day to find something that inspires you. It may be a big thing, it may be a small thing. Um, you may be able to inspire someone else in something that you do. And I think every time we get to do that, something in our heart becomes lighter. I was thrilled to remember that I had a blood pressure machine. So one of the things I'm going to do this afternoon is get it ready for this woman and make sure that, I spray it with hydrogen peroxide and other kinds of things to make sure that it's safe for her to have and lend it to her and hope she has a beautiful baby and a wonderful delivery. That's going to be my little piece for today. What's your piece going to be? Look for that and um, try to keep your spirits light and lifted. We're coming to the end of our time, and I want to make sure that we get a chance to pray together. It's something that everybody at Starr King tries to do when we leave one another. And I want to invite you to join me now in the spirit of meditation and prayer. Gracious Spirit, of all life, God of many names, and one abundant love. We thank you for this opportunity to be together and in the midst of a difficult time for everyone in the country and in the world to find sources of inspiration that can carry us through. Help us to find those sources and help us to be a source of inspiration for others. Please bless and hold in your embrace and in the light all those who struggle with this virus, and hold their families in the light as well. Give them strength and continued courage. We ask the same for all those who are working to protect and save them. The doctors and nurses, the chaplains and the respiratory therapists, the janitors and the food service people, every single person who's working in a healthcare facility, in a long-term care facility, in a nursing home, who are putting others first and not themselves. Protect them and give them strength and peace. We pray for all those who live with the uncertainty and the fear of having someone in their family or even themselves show symptoms of this virus. Give them courage as well and help them to overcome what they are facing now. We pray for those too who haven't got at this moment even the indirect protection and love of family and friends, those who live without homes, those who are without food, those whose uncertainty and fear are even greater because they do not have the stability that many of us take for granted. Help them to feel your love, your care, and help them to find those who will keep them closer to life and to a better day that all of us are praying for. We ask these things in the name of all that is holy. Amen. It's 11:30. Thank you so much for being with me. I'll be back next Wednesday at 11 o'clock California time. Hopefully not on my little phone, but back on my computer once I figure out what's going on. Have a wonderful day. Be an inspiration to somebody. Bye now.